In a quiet village where peace seemed unshakable, Jack believed his life had finally found balance. He had his beloved Tu Tien by his side, his mother Loi watching over them, and a home filled with warmth. But destiny has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. What began as simple days of love and family soon twisted into a dangerous web of betrayal and secrets. Jack would learn that not everyone who smiles is a friend, and that hidden in the shadows was an enemy who wanted to tear everything he loved apart. This is the story of Jack and Tu Tien, a tale of courage, family, and the fight against those who would destroy them. Jack woke early that morning, the golden light of dawn pouring through the thin curtains of their modest home. He stretched, listening to the soft breathing of Tu Tien still asleep beside him. The sound was a melody to his heart, a reminder that life was no longer a battle for survival, but a chance to live fully, with love. Tu Tien stirred awake, her eyes half closed but her smile as radiant as the sunrise itself. "Another day together," she whispered, resting her head on Jack's chest. For Jack, those words were more valuable than gold. After all the hardships, after facing betrayal and wandering through uncertainty, he now had a home filled with love. In the kitchen, the scent of warm tea drifted through the air. His mother, Loi, was already awake. She had prepared breakfast, humming an old tune that reminded Jack of his childhood. Loi was a woman of quiet strength, and though life had tested her endlessly, she never let bitterness take root in her heart. Instead, she had raised Jack to be strong and loyal, always reminding him that family was the one treasure no one could steal. The three of them shared a meal together, laughing at small jokes and simple memories. For a brief moment, everything seemed perfect. Yet behind their smiles, an invisible storm was gathering. Jack had noticed it for weeks now. Strange glances from neighbors, whispers that stopped the moment he entered a room, and shadows lingering a little too long near their house at night. Tu Tien, though gentle in spirit, had also felt it. "Something is wrong, Jack," she admitted quietly that morning as they walked to the garden. "It feels as if someone is watching us." Jack brushed her worries aside with a reassuring smile, but deep inside, unease gnawed at him. He had enemies. He always had. And some wounds of the past never truly healed. Later that day, while tending to the crops outside their home, Jack saw a figure at the edge of the forest. Tall, cloaked, and motionless. The figure didn't move closer, didn't wave, didn't speak, just watched. By the time Jack called out, the stranger was gone, swallowed by the trees. That night, Jack lay awake long after Tu Tien had fallen asleep. His instincts were alive with warning. He thought of the enemies he had once fought, the ones who had vanished but never been defeated. Could it be one of them? Was their peace about to be shattered? Loi noticed her son's restlessness. She touched his shoulder gently and whispered, "Whatever comes, remember you are not alone. You have us. And together, no shadow can destroy what we have built." Those words gave Jack strength, but they also confirmed what he feared most. His family would soon be tested. And when the truth was revealed, it would not only threaten his life, but the very love that kept him alive. The next morning, the air felt heavier than usual. Dark clouds gathered above the village, covering the sun with an uneasy gloom. Jack tried to dismiss it as just weather, but his instincts told him otherwise. He had lived too long with danger to ignore the feeling creeping into his bones. Tu Tien noticed his silence as they prepared breakfast together. "You're troubled," she said softly, her hand brushing against his. "Don't hide it from me." Jack hesitated. He didn't want to fill her heart with worry, but Tu Tien had always been more than just his love. She was his confidant, his partner in every storm. He told her about the cloaked figure by the forest, about the sense of being watched, and the whispers that followed him through the village. Tu Tien's face grew pale, but her eyes hardened with quiet determination. "If someone seeks to harm us, we will face it together. Do not carry this weight alone, Jack." Her courage gave him strength, but the shadow over his heart only deepened. That evening, as the family gathered by the warm glow of the lamp, a sharp knock echoed at their door. Jack rose instantly, his hand instinctively reaching for the old wooden staff he kept near the entryway. When he opened the door, no one stood there. Only a folded piece of parchment lay on the ground, sealed with black wax. Jack's blood ran cold. He recognized that seal. It belonged to an old rival, a man thought to be gone forever, someone whose hatred for Jack had burned as fiercely as a raging fire. His name was Duran, a cunning manipulator who thrived on lies and fear. Years ago, Jack had exposed his corruption and driven him out. Everyone believed Duran had disappeared, but now it was clear he had returned. Jack opened the letter. The words were simple, but each one carried venom. "You took everything from me. Now I will take what you love most. Watch carefully, for I am closer than you think." Tu Tien gasped when she read it, and Loy's face turned pale. Silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of the lamp. "We must leave," Tu Tien whispered, her voice trembling. "We cannot stay here if he knows where we live." But Jack shook his head. "Running will only feed his power. If we flee, he will chase us forever. No. This is our home, and I will not allow Duran to drive us from it." The decision was made, but unease lingered. That night, as rain pattered against the windows, Jack stood guard by the door, the staff firm in his grip. His eyes scanned the darkness beyond the glass, searching for any movement, any sign of danger. Hours passed. The forest whispered with wind and rain, and Jack's mind wandered to the past. Duran was not a man who attacked directly. He was a spider, weaving traps of deceit and striking when least expected. Jack knew that if Duran had returned, it would not be with brute force. It would be with tricks, with whispers, with betrayal. Near midnight, Jack thought he heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate. He moved to the window, peering into the storm. For a moment, he saw nothing but rain. Then there, a shadow, watching, waiting. Jack's heart pounded, but he did not open the door. He stood silently, letting the figure linger, knowing that revealing fear was exactly what Duran wanted. Finally, the shadow melted back into the forest, leaving only the echo of silence behind. When morning came, Tu Tien found him still standing guard, his eyes tired but resolute. She wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "Whatever comes, we will face it. He may think fear will break us, but he does not know the strength of this family." Jack kissed her forehead, but inside, he knew the truth. Duran's games had only just begun, and the first strike was coming soon. The third day arrived with an eerie stillness. The village usually woke with the chatter of neighbors and the distant calls of vendors, but that morning, the streets were quiet, almost watchful. Jack felt the weight of it pressing against his chest as he stepped outside to gather wood. When he returned, Tu Tien was waiting at the table, her hands clenched around another letter. Someone had slipped it beneath the door while Jack was gone. This time, the black wax seal was broken, and the words inside were scrawled with a trembling fury. "You cannot protect them forever. I have eyes everywhere. Every smile, every moment of peace. I will poison it. You will never see me coming." Jack's jaw tightened. Duran was not just threatening them. He was unraveling their sense of safety piece by piece. Tu Tien's face showed fear, but there was fire there too. "He wants to trap us in terror," she said firmly. "We cannot let him win by living in shadows." Jack nodded, though the unease never left his eyes. He began moving cautiously through the village that day, studying faces, watching for any trace of betrayal. Every stranger seemed suspicious. Every whisper could be a spy. The tension gnawed at him, but he forced himself to stay calm. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Lois spotted something outside the window. "Jack," she whispered, her finger trembling as she pointed. "There." Through the glass, a figure stood at the edge of the forest. He wore a dark coat, his face hidden beneath a hood, unmoving, watching. Jack rose slowly, his staff in hand, and stepped outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and heavy. The figure did not move. Jack approached cautiously, his voice steady. Enough games, Duran. Show yourself. But when he reached the edge of the trees, the man was gone. Only footprints in the wet soil remained, leading deeper into the forest. Jack followed for a few paces before stopping. This was exactly what Duran wanted, to lure him into the dark, away from his family. That night, Jack laid out a plan. He and Tu Tien would keep watch in shifts, one always awake to guard while the other rested. They could not afford a single careless moment. The first watch fell to Jack. Hours passed in silence until he heard something faint, a rustling at the back of the house. He moved quietly, his staff gripped tight, and eased open the door to the courtyard. There, leaning against the wall, was a knife. Its blade gleamed silver in the moonlight, and carved into the handle was a single word: soon. Jack's breath caught. It was not just a warning, it was a promise. He brought the weapon inside and placed it on the table. Tu Tien stared at it, her hands trembling, but then she straightened her shoulders. He wants us afraid, but you once told me that fear is only as strong as the power we give it. We will not break, Jack. Not now. Her voice steadied him. Together they prepared, checking the locks, keeping the lamps burning through the night. Yet even as Jack held Tu Tien close, listening to the rain tapping against the glass, he knew this was not the climax of Duran's plan. This was only the beginning of something far more dangerous. And deep down, Jack could feel it. The storm was about to break. The night after the knife was found, no one in the house truly slept. Jack remained seated near the window, his staff resting across his knees, his eyes sharp in the dim glow of the night lamp. Tu Tien lay beside Loi, keeping her calm, whispering lullabies though her own heart thudded like a drum. The rain fell harder, streaking across the glass wall like dark fingers clawing to get inside. At dawn, the village stirred again, but Jack noticed something different. Whispers spread in corners, neighbors avoided his gaze, and one or two doors closed abruptly when he walked by. It was as if the shadow of Duran had seeped into the very air, making everyone complicit or too afraid to speak. Jack's suspicion grew when he passed by the blacksmith shop. A set of fresh horseshoes leaned against the wall, still wet from the forge. But it wasn't the iron that caught his eye, it was the muddy footprint beside them, the same size and shape as the prints he had seen near the forest. Duran had help, someone inside the village who knew when Jack left his home, when he returned, and how best to strike. That evening, Jack returned and told Tu Tien what he had seen. "He isn't alone," he whispered. "Someone here is feeding him information." Tu Tien's eyes widened. But who? We trusted them all. Before Jack could answer, a loud crack echoed outside, the sound of a branch snapping. Jack rushed to the window and saw them. Not one figure, but three, moving like shadows along the edge of the trees. Their faces were hidden by masks, and they carried weapons gleaming in the fading light. Jack's blood went cold. It was no longer a game of threats. This was the moment Duran had been building toward. He motioned for Tu Tien and Loi to stay low and silent. Then he slipped outside, crouching behind the woodpile, watching the figures creep closer. His grip tightened on the staff, his body ready for the strike. The masked men stopped just a few feet from a house. One of them whispered something, his voice muffled by the mask. Jack caught the word: tonight. They turned and melted back into the forest, leaving behind only the echo of their intent. Jack stepped back inside, his face pale but his voice firm. It's happening soon. He will not wait much longer. Tu Tien's hand slipped into his. Then we stand together. Whatever comes, he will not break us. The hours that followed stretched like years. The rain beat harder, the wind howled, and every creak of the house felt like a threat in disguise. Jack moved from window to window, watching, waiting. His heart pounded not from fear of death, but from fear of losing the people he loved most. Then, just after midnight, it began. The sound of engines roared from the distance, motorbikes speeding toward the house. Headlights flared through the trees, cutting across the glass wall like piercing eyes. Jack sprang to the door, staff in hand, as Tu Tien pulled Loi into the back room. 3 bikes screeched to a stop outside. The masked men leapt off, weapons drawn, their movements quick and precise. They weren't there to frighten anymore. They were there to end it. Jack planted his feet firmly, his voice a growl against the storm. "If you want them, you'll have to go through me." And as the first man charged, lightning split the sky, illuminating the battlefield. The war Duran had promised was no longer a shadow. It was here,